Okay. I might edit you out, I might not. We'll see how
You.
lazy I am. Okay, cool.
I can also.
No, I'm not worried about it. Hey, everybody. Your instructor, Liam. Maillaro. In case you're wondering. Just gonna block Liz. Okay, great. Gonna go over some throwing stuff. Just need water. There's Liz again. Yeah, I'm gonna edit this out.
Oh, it's getting tin.
All right. So take 2. All right. Let's do this. Wow, I bet you can see the hole in my shorts like crazy. Oh man, should be good. Well, so first you want to make sure you get all those edges taken care of. If you have an oval, that's going to cause a lot of problems. This is so much fun. I feel like I'm on my own cooking show. Cooking up pots. So once it's pretty well rounded, make sure that you find the center of the wheel as best you can. Lift up, throw down pretty firmly. Someone you hate, get those nasty emotions and feelings out. Yep, all the good stuff. And I'm tapping around the form just to make sure that it's just that much more adhered to the wheel surface as well. All right. So, don't forget, you can use your sponge to apply water or just directly go from the bucket to the actual wheel. Just don't spritz water on, none of this, none of that. We've already spoken about that. Okay. Tuck in the elbow. Compress to form a little bit more just to make sure it stays adhered. And then we're going to begin by coning the form. So remember, all that power is coming from the palm because it's directly connected to your forearm. You're going to want to lean in with both your legs and your body with your left hand. And opposite of that is going to be your right hand squeezing in with the palms and the fingertips as well. Get the clay moving. And this, you're going to do this a few times. Shouldn't be done in just one go. Okay. Compressing, I'm making sure that there's no space in between my hands and I'm focusing on the side of my right palm. If you need to kind of test and see what's most comfortable for you, do so, but I guarantee that it's going to be a bit easier than the inside of your palm. Okay, I'm going to do this a couple times. And it gets easier with each one. It's a gradual thing. It shouldn't be all done at once. Notice I'm applying water very frequently, compressing, hands connected. I'm pushing down and I'm also pushing forward a little bit, more so with my left hand. If you need to apply more water on the way down, that's fine. And the goal, once again, is to have your form resemble a dome or like a semi-sphere. It should be wider than it is tall, ideally. Notice I'm looking directly over the center of this piece. Got a nice air bubble in here somewhere. It's okay. One more time. Just a little bit. Good. Nice. Try to get it as even as possible. If you're not sure that your form is centered, make sure that you can use the wheel as a reference. That's as perfect as it's going to get in terms of being symmetric. Just compare by using your index finger, placing it on the wheel on the side, and then feeling your form. And if you can feel your hand or your fingertip moving, you know that it's not completely centered. That goes for the top as well as for the sides. If it's not perfect, it's okay, but you want it to be as close as you can get it. Sometimes if you got an air pocket because you didn't do a good job wedging, it'll fight you that much more, but hopefully I'll be able to get rid of it when I'm raising the clay. So I'm not going to worry about it too much more. That's the whole video. Just me fighting an air bubble. There it is. Alright, so let's just get past this one more time. Excellent. Alright, next step, you're going to locate the center top of your form, and you're going to begin the descent towards the middle of the wheel to create the initial opening. That is going to establish your floor. Sorry for the sirens in the background. They're after me. If your hands start to move with the clay in a direction that you don't want, like you're taking it in a spiral, just remove your hands and start from the beginning. There's no harm in stopping for a little bit and just regaining your bearings. And again, you don't want to hit the wheel, so after a while you're just going to want to stop and check the depth of the floor of your form with the needle tool. So stop the wheel, press down, follow the needle with your fingertip, touch the clay base, and it'll reveal to you how thick the floor is. It shouldn't be any less than, let's say, like 5/8 to an inch. It's like a good way to make sure you have enough material to trim later. And then afterwards, I'm going to widen the base by squeezing my fingertips from my right hand towards my left. My left hand is still on the outside. My right hand is touching the left hand, but draped over and making contact with the inside walls and the floor. So although the top is widening a little bit, I really am trying to focus predominantly on the base of the inside. The floor should be wider. The diameter of the floor should be wider than the diameter of the lip of your piece or the opening. Okay. And just get some excess clay out. First raise is really going to be about establishing direction as opposed to significant height. So I'm kind of aiming just to bring my hands in closer to the center of the wheel, but I don't want to grab so much clay that, you know, I start to feel material wanting to rip off. That's going to be a really good indicator if you can't keep all the clay from the base. So all I'm going to do is this is mainly because I'm working with a larger piece, so pay more attention to the second raise as opposed to this first one, but the concept is the same. I'm bringing all this material from the outer portion of the form to the center of the wheel. So I am getting some extra height, but I'm really trying to get that cone shape established as well. Even if you're making a bowl, you don't want to just start going out. That's going to give the clay a very particular kind of memory that you won't really be able to control that well once it starts to want to move on its own in its own direction. Okay, so this raise It's going to be more so about the way that I want you all to approach it is with your left hand now switching from the outside to the inside, and your right hand is going to be on the outside of the clay, roughly around 5 or 6 o'clock. If it's more comfortable for you to hold it a bit further out, that's okay, but I wouldn't exaggerate that too much. You want as much control as you can, and the closer you are to your body, the easier it will be for you to raise the clay evenly. So I'm pushing out with my left hand and I'm pushing in with my right. And as I'm squeezing, I have to make sure that my right hand is pinching the thumb in between the knuckles of my index finger. And I'm not flat like this. I'm more so kind of trying to approach the side of the form with as much support as I can. So I'm kind of leaning against the face of this entire form. And at the end, I'll cut this in half so I can show you a bit more in depth how my hands look opposite each other. But as you can see, I'm still trying to make sure that as I'm raising the clay, I'm not just going up, I'm also going in. Tonight on Maillaro Ceramics. And I have not stopped rehydrating my clay. This is a good width to be at, but if I wanted to make something thinner, I would do exactly what I was doing before when I was centering, which is cone in from the bottom. So don't forget about your pinkies, they're equally as important. Make your way all to the top, and notice my elbows engaged with my hips, so it has all the strength from my torso behind it, and my legs as well. And every once in a while, this excess clay that builds up on your sides is only going to hinder your ability to move material. So just take a moment, you can use your fingertips or like a rib tool. Yours is not going to be blue most likely, but something like this to help you kind of remove that excess material just from like scraping the form. Let the wheel come to you, you don't have to address it from multiple sides. Okay, some more water, sponge. Make sure you don't have too much water on the inside of your piece, so with a dry sponge, you can collect whatever's at the bottom. And again, squeezing out with the left and in with the right, getting underneath that left hand with the right hand as well. As you're physically grabbing the clay, don't forget to breathe when you're raising. Follow all the way through, and when you're about, I don't know, 7/8 of the way up, maybe a little less than that, but towards the top of the form, you're going to want to very gently loosen up on the pressure that you apply, just to make sure that your lip at the top of this form doesn't get too thin. And after every pull, you do also want to compress the top, not too firmly. If you press too hard, the width of your lip is gonna kind of flare out too wide, and it's very uncomfortable. More water. And I'm just going for a cylinder. Coning in again though, because the wider I go, the more difficult it'll be to bring that material back in, and after a certain point it won't want to move with me. Okay. One more. That should be good. And so when I cone in, I'm also reintroducing material back into the walls. The thinner the diameter, the thicker the walls become, and the opposite is true for when you are expanding your walls. When the volume becomes greater, your walls become thinner. Okay. So again, squeezing, and you really want to take into account, you should be able to see that material above your right hand. If you can't really distinguish the material and your hands are flat, you're probably going to remove material very uncomfortably and just tear it off. And your rhythm is going to be established the more you do this. Just like anything else, just a bit more practice. And if you look at it from a bird's eye view over the lip of the form to the bottom of your piece, you should be able to see that the walls start out relatively thin at the top, and when you get closer to the bottom, you'll start to see a little bit of a flare, and that's an indicator to let you know that you have more material to pull within reason. If your form is getting too thin, and you can feel it getting too thin, then don't try to go for those extra pulls unless you're trying to just push the material to experiment, because after a certain point, the clay is just going to want to collapse on itself. Let's see. So, I'll press my top again. Let's go for one more cone or collar, And then one more pull, and I might stretch it too thin towards the top, but that's okay. Don't forget to breathe, it's really important. Follow through all the way to the top, and notice how I'm slowing my wheel down. The greater the volume, the lesser the speed of the wheel should be. Alright, so that's as high as I'm going to go with this, and at this point I can just kind of start to engineer the shape of the contour of my form with my inside hand, which is still going to be my left, and the outside hand, which is my right. And in doing so, you gradually want to make your way from the bottom of the form to the top with the intent of not necessarily evening out your form, but most likely you will be doing some editing to get rid of any uneven portions that might exist. Following through all the way. And again, this is specifically for a cylinder, so I'll probably send some other stuff with specific shapes in mind in case anybody's interested in seeing like bottles and vases, things of that nature. But for now, the cylinder is really what we're shooting for. If you can make a good cylinder, you can pretty much make anything. Oh, sorry. Oof. Okay. And this clay is very wet, and it does not have a ton of the ideal properties that you would want for a throwing body. So when I cut this in half, you're going to definitely see that it's a little bit thicker on the bottom than I would ideally like it to be. But that's okay, because that just means that you need to know whatever kind of clay you're working with is going to be able to support whatever form you're trying to make. And this just comes with doing it a bunch of times. The clay that we use at Sculpture Space is going to be a bit more forgiving than this stuff. This to get any wider. Should have left a little bit more clay on the top to make it even, but that's okay. Compressing again a little bit more. Cleaning up the bottom as well with a wooden tool if you've got one. Oh, here it is. This is like one of the most versatile tools that allows you to kind of cut into the excess of your clay. Hope you can see this. There's more than one way to use this, but for now, just understand that you can use this edge to kind of flatten and straighten and take away any excess that you don't want. Just get underneath a little bit to make myself a little pathway for the needle tool. All right. So I'm going to cut this now and show you the inside. If it stays together, it's probably going to fall apart, but let's see. Okay. Not bad. All right. So for the time being, this is fine. So as you can see, it's still pretty thick on the bottom. That's rough. That's like not far from an inch. And this is okay for this amount of clay and for the kind of volume that I'm going, but when you're making your forms and you are not going quite as large, you shouldn't have to have too much clay on the bottom. It'll vary from case to case, but understand if your form feels physically heavy, then most likely we're going to have to work a bit more on pulling more material. So again, what it's looking like from an X-ray perspective is having your hands kind of like a solid wall with your left hand here, right hand on the outside, squeezing together, left hand approaching above the right hand, and your right hand following through to make sure that you're evenly moving that material. So if you just kind of keep this like S shape in mind, you should be a bit better off in making sure that you're able to collect all that necessary stuff. That's pretty much it, with more stuff to come. Hope everybody's having a great week. Happy Wednesday. I'm going to shut up now. I'll see you guys either on Saturday or Tuesday.